A humble 7-year-old girl pays for the coffee of a man who missed his meeting not knowing he's a millionaire and her real father. Before we dive into the story, I'm Marcos Paulo, the storyteller. Leave a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The rain that morning had finally eased, leaving behind puddles that reflected Manhattan's gray sky like fractured mirrors. 7-year-old Emma Parker gripped her small pink umbrella in one hand, and in the other, 3 crumpled dollar bills, money she had saved up over weeks by doing small favors for Mrs. Wilson, the neighbor in the downstairs apartment. Today was special. Today, Emma would finally buy her mother the chocolate muffin she always longed for in the baker's corner window. It was little, but in the girl's mind, it meant everything. Straight from the bakery and back home, understand? Her mother, Beth, had instructed before leaving for her morning shift at the restaurant on 29th Street. Beth worked double shifts, at Miller's Diner in the mornings and cleaning offices at night, just to afford their small one-bedroom apartment in the city's forgotten side. Emma pushed open the heavy glass door of the cafe, making the little bell above chime her entrance. Warmth and the scent of fresh coffee wrapped around her like a hug. She stood in line, counting and recounting her money. That's when she noticed him. A tall man in an expensive suit was patting down his pockets frantically, his face flushed with frustration. "Sorry, sir, but your card's been declined," the barista said loud enough for everyone to hear. The man looked at his watch, 8:47. He murmured something Emma didn't catch. "No, not today, please." His voice was trembling. "I have the most important meeting of my life at 9. I must have switched wallets." Emma recognized that desperate look, the same one she often saw on her mother's face at night, surrounded by scattered bills. Without thinking, she stepped forward, stretching her tiny arm up to the counter. "I can pay for his coffee, please," she said, offering her $3 as if simply talking about the weather. The barista raised an eyebrow but took the money. The coffee machine hissed. The man turned, finally noticing Emma. His eyes blinked, confused, almost teary. "Sweetheart, you don't have to do that," he tried to smile. "It's okay," Emma shrugged. "My mom says helping is more important than anything else." Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, or just surprise at finding such kindness in someone so small. He crouched down to her level. "That's very generous of you. What's your name?" "Emma Parker," she answered proudly. "I'm 7. The man repeated the surname, testing it on his lips. "Parker. My mom's Beth Parker. She works at Miller's Diner and cleans offices at night." The barista interrupted, sliding the cup across the counter. "Here's your Americano, sir." "Richardson," he said, dazed. "James Richardson." Emma beamed, showing the little gap where a front tooth was missing. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Richardson." He picked up the coffee with still shaky hands. "Emma, I want to pay you back. Do you like muffins? Or something else?" Her eyes sparkled. "I was going to buy a chocolate muffin for my mom. Chocolate makes her happy." James signaled to the barista. A chocolate muffin and another coffee to go. He paid with the money Emma had given him, plus a few notes he finally found in an inside pocket. While they waited, James couldn't take his eyes off Emma, studying her features, the strawberry blonde hair tied in a crooked ponytail, the way her foot tapped. It was impossible not to think of Catherine, that same golden strand, that delicate nose. The barista handed the muffin to Emma and gave James his change. "Thank you for saving my morning, Emma Parker," James said, voice thick with something he didn't quite understand. "You are extraordinary. You're welcome. I hope your meeting goes well," she said, skipping to the door. Before she left, James called out, "Emma, which diner did you say your mom works at?" "Miller's on 23rd Street, she replied, waving her pink umbrella as she disappeared down the sidewalk. James stood there, unmoving, then pulled out his phone and called his assistant, rescheduled a meeting with Johnson. Something more important just came up. In his pocket, the coffee receipt had scribbled on the back, Emma Parker. Below, he'd written, Beth Parker, and next to it the date from 7 years ago, the day Catherine left him without explanation. The next morning, Miller's Diner was busier than usual. The lunch rush turned the small restaurant into a chaotic ballet of waitresses balancing trays and impatient customers complaining about the weather. Behind the counter, Beth Parker wore the automatic smile she had trained so well. Inside, her body screamed for rest. "Welcome to Miller's. What can I get you today?" she asked, approaching a table at the back section. But the man sitting there wasn't just any customer. As she raised her eyes, Beth felt her stomach drop. James Richardson himself was staring at her as if trying to solve a riddle. "Just coffee for now," he answered calmly, studying her every reaction. Beth tried to maintain her composure, but her pen almost slipped from her hand. She wrote the order on her pad, took a deep breath, and turned. Didn't get 3 steps before James called out, "Excuse me, are you Beth Parker?" She turned slowly. Her heart pounded so loudly she feared he could hear it. "Yes, have we met before?" "Not exactly," he hesitated. "But I met your daughter yesterday, Emma." Beth froze. Her eyes shifted from shock to the guarded look of a protective mother. "Where did you see Emma?" "At Baker's Corner. She paid for my coffee." James smiled, a smile almost sad. "The kindest thing anyone has ever done for me." Beth relaxed slightly. That sounded just like Emma. "That does sound like her. Always wants to give the little she has." The coffee arrived. Beth placed the mug in front of him. "Thank you for being kind to her." "Actually, I wanted to thank her." James pulled out a card and placed it on the table. "I'm the CEO of Richardson Enterprises. I'd like to set up a college fund, maybe even more." Beth's face went pale instantly. Her fingers grabbed the card as if it was something dangerous. "James Richardson," she whispered, reading the name. "You're you." Everyone in New York knew who he was. The tech magnate, the man from the headlines, Catherine Hartford's ex-husband. Beth handed the card back, her hand trembling. "Thank you, but we don't need charity." "It's not charity," he insisted calmly. "It's gratitude, and maybe an emotional debt." "Emma reminded me of something important yesterday." Beth took a deep breath, fighting for control. Why would a man like him care so much? "Why are you so interested in a random child's gesture?" James looked at her with a disarming honesty. "Because gestures like that are rare, especially in this city." Before they could continue, one of Beth's co-workers called her from across the room. Beth swallowed hard. "I have to get back to work. Have a good day, Mr. Richardson." As she walked away, James noticed something slip from her order pad. A small, faded photograph. It was Emma as a baby, smiling brightly at the camera. He picked it up delicately and returned it to the counter, but the tightness in his chest only grew. He left a $100 tip next to the cup and walked out, more determined than ever not to let this story fade. That night, Beth's small apartment was a sharp contrast to Manhattan's bright streets outside. A humble place, but clean and full of signs of life. Emma's drawings on the fridge, mismatched mugs from thrift store trips, children's books stacked in a corner. Beth sat on the living room sofa bed, folding the laundry she'd brought back from the restaurant shift. Each shirt she smoothed was an effort to convince herself it was just another ordinary day. But the name James Richardson rang in her head like a broken bell. "Mom," Emma called, appearing in the hallway in pink pajamas, covered with stars. Her strawberry blonde hair was loose, damp from her bath, spreading the scent of cheap shampoo. Beth breathed in, forcing a smile. "Hi, sweetheart, come here." Emma snuggled beside her, bare feet curling on the cold floor. She carried a small brown paper bag. "This is the chocolate muffin. Mr. Richardson bought it for you. He said I was very kind." Beth took the package with slightly trembling hands, but didn't open it. Instead, she looked deep into her daughter's eyes. "Emma, tell me exactly what happened today, please." "He was sad," Emma explained, getting comfortable on the sofa, almost proud. "His card didn't work, so I paid for his coffee. Like you always say, we help people, right? Then he bought the muffin and asked where you worked. I told him Miller's. He seemed happy, said he'd pay me back." Beth let out a long sigh, hugging Emma by the shoulders. "You did something beautiful, but next time, try not to tell so much about our life, okay? Not everyone is good, but he was so polite, Mom. He looked like he needed help." Beth nodded. lacking the courage to say that sometimes danger comes from those who seem the politest and most vulnerable. Later that night, after putting Emma to bed in her tiny room, Beth sat on the floor by an old dresser. She opened one of the drawers and pulled out a battered shoebox tied with a faded blue ribbon. Inside were fragments of a past she tried to forget, but which never left her. Photos of her and Catherine in hospital uniforms, still young and full of dreams. Maternity bracelets from Mount Sinai Hospital with the label Elizabeth Walker, companion of Catherine Hartford. A tiny pair of baby shoes kept like treasure. And at the bottom, the yellowed envelope with trembling letters, "For Emma." Open on her 18th birthday. Beth's hands shook as she ran her fingers over Catherine's handwriting. Her friend's last words were loaded with fear and love. "Promise me, Beth, don't let him find my daughter. No matter what they say, protect her from everything, including him." Beth pressed the envelope to her chest and closed her eyes, letting silent tears fall. Everything she had done, changing her name, inventing a story, giving up her career, was because of that promise. For Emma. Meanwhile, across the city, James Richardson paced inside his glass-walled penthouse. The apartment was a display of success. Minimalist art, Italian furniture, spectacular views of Manhattan. But none of it mattered. He felt suffocated, like he was inside an aquarium. In the corner of the room, a framed photo of Catherine smiling punched him in the gut every time he looked. That beautiful, troubled woman who had left 7 years ago without answers, but leaving something far bigger. James rubbed his face hard, the weight of possibilities almost crushing him. Emma, that sweet little girl, with hair like Catherine's and eyes that seemed mirrors of his own, the way she spoke, the gap-toothed smile, her age. 7 years, he whispered to himself. 7 years. He picked up his phone and dialed the private investigator, Daniel Reeves. His voice came out rougher than he wanted. "Daniel, I need everything you can get on Beth Parker and her daughter Emma. Medical records, school records, past addresses, previous names, everything." On the other end, Daniel was silent for a second before replying. "Does this have something to do with Catherine, sir?" James stared out the window, seeing the distant lights of the city. He felt the weight of the words before he spoke them. I think she might be my daughter, Daniel." "Understood," the investigator said, with the calm of someone who had heard everything. "I'll start immediately." James hung up and let the phone drop on the couch. He sat on the table edge, massaging his temples. His head spun with confusing memories. Catherine pregnant, promises exchanged by the fireplace, plans to choose names together. And then the disappearance, the panic, the desperate search that ended only in silence. Now, after so many years, fate placed a little girl with a pink umbrella in his path. The daughter he didn't even know if he'd have. His heart tightened in a way it hadn't since Catherine died. There, in the luxurious silence of his apartment, James felt the first tears come, not for Catherine, but for the little girl who might be his, and who, for some terrible reason, had been kept from him all this time. The next day, Beth woke up before sunrise. The grey light of dawn filtered through the thin curtain in the living room. She still couldn't sleep properly. The name James Richardson echoed in her mind like a muffled bell, the echoes of a past she thought she had buried for good. Emma was still asleep, arms spread on the pillow as if she dreamed of flying. Beth watched her for long seconds, fighting a knot in her chest. That child was her world, her reason, her love, and her biggest secret. While packing her lunch for the afternoon shift, the phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. An unknown number. "Hello? Beth?" said a deep, soft voice. Familiar, real. "It's me, James." Beth felt the blood drain from her face. "How did you get this number?" "Emma told me the name of the diner. I spoke with the manager. She said you were off today, and she gave me your contact. I need to talk to you." "There's nothing to talk about." "There's everything to talk about," he insisted, with a calm that sounded desperate. "Can you meet me today, please?" Beth stayed silent. Instinct said run, But something stronger, maybe the truth banging at her chest, made her reply, "Meet me at 11, at Café Blue Pencil, back table." "Thank you," he said simply, and hung up. Later, at Café Blue Pencil, time seemed to move slowly. The background music was soft. The air smelled of fresh bread. Beth was already seated when James arrived. He wore a discreet suit, none of the flashy executive look from magazines. His eyes were tired. They carried the same questions she had tried to avoid for years. "You came," he said, pulling out the chair across from her. Beth crossed her arms. "Say what you have to say." James took a deep breath. "Is Emma my daughter?" Beth gripped her purse in her lap. "Emma is my daughter," she answered firmly. "I'm the one who woke up with her fevers at night, who cleaned up vomit at 3 in the morning, who held her hand on her first day of school, who cried in secret because I didn't know how to pay the rent, and She swallowed hard. "I loved her every single day. From the moment Catherine put that baby in my arms and said, 'Run, please, promise me he'll never find her.'" James fell silent. Catherine's name was a ghost between them. "She told you that?" he asked. Beth nodded. "She said you were dangerous, controlling, that if you found out about the child, you'd take her away." James looked like he'd been punched. His eyes filled up. "And you believed her?" "She showed me bruises, told me stories." He shook his head. No, that's not true." Beth looked at him with the coldness of someone who spent years believing only one version. "Then why would she run away pregnant, change the child's name, beg me with tears in her eyes to vanish from your life?" James lowered his head. Because maybe Catherine was sick," he said, almost whispering. "She had a psychiatric disorder, was diagnosed before she got pregnant. Paranoia, persecutory delusions. She stopped taking her meds. I tried to help, tried to save her." Beth froze. "That's not possible." "It is." James pulled an envelope from his pocket. "Here, a copy of the psychiatric report, signed by 2 specialists. She refused the meds because she thought I was poisoning her. She recorded me secretly, invented fights, created evidence. I was powerless." Beth took the envelope with hesitant hands, read, and something inside her cracked. "Why didn't she tell me this?" James looked at her with sadness. "Because she believed the world was against her, including you." The silence between them thickened. Outside, people walked by, clueless that an entire life was unraveling inside that cafe. James continued, "Emma looked me in the eyes yesterday and called me a hero, without knowing who I was. She has your heart, Beth, and my blood. She's everything." Beth fought back tears. "You have no idea what it was like living hidden, running, changing names, sleeping afraid, all because of a promise that maybe was built on a lie." James stretched out his hand across the table but didn't touch her. "I don't want to take Emma from you, ever. I just want to know her, help, be a part. Can I?" Beth hesitated. Then for the first time her voice faltered. "She deserves to know who you really are. But don't hurt her, James. Please don't hurt her." He nodded, emotional. "Never." In the days that followed, James began appearing discreetly in Emma's daily life, never intruding, always asking first. He brought muffins, helped with homework, watched her favorite cartoons on the living room rug. Beth watched it all with her heart tight. Seeing them together was both beautiful and painful. Emma seemed to blossom with James's affection, still unaware of the whole truth. But Beth feared what would happen when the rest of the world found out. On a rainy afternoon, while Emma napped on the couch hugging a stuffed bunny, James and Beth sat at the small kitchen table. 2 steaming mugs of tea sat between them. "I'm preparing everything with my lawyer so we can formalize my bond with Emma," James began, voice low, as if afraid to wake the girl. "Without changing anything between you two, you'll remain her primary guardian. I just want to ensure that if something happens, Emma won't be left vulnerable." Beth nodded, staring at the rising steam. "And if the world out there finds out who she is, that she's Catherine Richardson's daughter, that you're the father, the press, the politicians, Hartford..." James stared off for a moment. Hartford doesn't have power over me anymore. Not personally, but I know he'd use Emma to make headlines, to pose as the sensitive grandfather who lost his daughter and now wants to protect his granddaughter. He never cared about Catherine alive, only about what she represented. Emma is no one's trophy, Beth said firmly. I completely agree. The silence stretched, heavy, until James took a deep breath. That's why I'm reinforcing security. People I trust, no visible uniforms, just to ensure Emma's safe wherever she goes. Beth stiffened. You're watching my daughter? Protecting, he corrected. No hidden mics, no black car at the door, just plainclothes security in the neighborhood. If Hartford finds out Emma is his granddaughter, and believe me, he will, he'll try to take her, claim you kidnapped her, that you lived a lie all these years. I need to be ready. Beth set her mug down with a clink. The liquid splashed. I don't know if I should be relieved or terrified. James leaned forward. Be confident. I won't let anyone take her from you. Emma is our bond, Beth. I didn't know it for 7 years, but now I do. And I swear I won't let anyone destroy what we've built. Beth looked at him long and hard. In him, she saw not just the billionaire CEO, but an exhausted man, marked by life, who just wanted a chance to reclaim lost time. Before she could respond, James's phone buzzed. He answered in a controlled tone. Talk to me. Beth watched the immediate change in his face, from concern to something far darker. Are you sure about that? Check again. I want images. Send them to me. He hung up and stood, his body tense. What happened? Beth asked, her stomach twisting. James looked at her with an expression that made her blood run cold. A car was caught circling Emma's school the past 2 mornings. The driver is Marcus Delaney. Beth went pale. The ex-security chief for Hartford? Yes, the same one who was with Catherine when she disappeared. The same one Hartford assigned to watch over her. She brought her hand to her mouth. He's trying to take Emma, or laying the groundwork for something. Hartford has unlimited resources, Beth. If he's decided he wants Emma for his political narrative, he'll play dirty. Beth felt her legs give way. What do we do? James cupped her face in his hands. We get ahead of it. I won't wait for them to show up at your door with a cooked-up warrant or smear campaigns. I will protect you both, even if I have to buy half the courts in this city. She blinked, tears welling up. Just don't take her from me, James. Please. I won't. I promise. But I will make sure Hartford can't get close. For that, we might need to formalize things between us sooner than planned. Beth swallowed. You're talking about the marriage your lawyers suggested. I'm talking about something beyond paperwork. I'm talking about truly standing together, Beth, for Emma. She looked toward the living room door, where Emma slept, then back at James. The questions piled up in her throat, but her fear for Emma's future screamed louder. Then let's talk about it, she said finally, voice barely a whisper. James just nodded, a muscle ticking in his jaw. There, in that modest kitchen, they sealed the beginning of a pact that would forever change their lives and protect the little girl who was, unknowingly, the beating heart of it all. Days later, they were at the courthouse. There were no grand flowers or sparkling champagne. Instead, there was Miranda, James's loyal assistant, who had thrown together a modest bouquet, and Mrs. Wilson, who wept from start to finish and hugged Emma as if she were her own granddaughter. Emma, of course, shone the brightest. She wore a little blue dress Beth had found in a thrift shop, but on her it looked fit for a princess. She stood between them, clutching her mother's and father's hands, almost unaware why everyone was so teary-eyed. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, James only squeezed Beth's hand. There was no kiss, not yet. But there was something neither of them had words for, a profound sense of harbor that wrapped around them right there at the clerk's office. On their way out, Emma yelled for all to hear, "My mum and dad got married because of me. Now we're a real family." James looked at Beth and for the first time in days let out an unguarded laugh. Beth laughed too, though a lump formed in her throat. "She has no idea how true that is," James murmured. "Neither do we," Beth whispered back. But peace didn't last long. Just 2 days after the wedding, the district attorney, pressured by Hartford's heavyweight attorneys, formally requested a review of Emma's custody. They claimed the marriage was a recent maneuver to cement an identity fraud. Beth was summoned to testify. James showed up at her side, hand in hand, something he never imagined he'd do in a courtroom. Hartford's lawyer, a gaunt man with glasses sunken deep into his skeletal face, insisted on calling her Elizabeth Walker in a biting tone, painting her as a fugitive. "You lived under a false identity for 7 years. How can we be sure your care for the minor was legitimate and not a plot to keep her from her biological grandfather, Senator Hartford?" Beth's stomach twisted. Before she could reply, James stood up. "With all due respect, Your Honor, this line of questioning completely ignores Emma's welfare. For 7 years, Beth was mother, father, protector, and provider. I've only just arrived, but what I found was a happy, healthy, deeply loved child. If that's a crime, then we are all failures as a society." The judge observed James for a long moment, then, more gently, turned to Beth. "Why did you run, Mrs. Walker?" Beth squeezed her eyes shut, tears welling. "Out of fear. I wholeheartedly believed I was saving Emma from her mother's fate. I swear, everything I did was to protect her." Silence. Under the table, James squeezed her hand in a firm grip that said, "You're not alone anymore." Outside the courtroom, James's lead lawyer approached them with a controlled smile. "The judge has ordered that the current shared custody arrangement stand while the case is reviewed on its merits. In practice, you stay together. Emma stays in her home. But this isn't over." Beth closed her eyes, exhausted. James pulled her into an unexpected hug, and this time, it wasn't just about Emma. It was something for them. When they pulled away, Beth saw in his eyes the same thing she felt. A confusing, sweet, terrifying swirl of fear and tenderness. That night, they ate dinner together at the small kitchen table. Emma laughed loudly, telling silly jokes, and Beth and James exchanged looks that spoke of everything they still hadn't found the courage to say. Later, standing by Emma's bedroom door, Beth watched James tuck her in. When he came out, Beth whispered, "Thank you for being everything she needs and everything I didn't know I needed too." James rested his forehead on hers. "We're going to get through this, together." Autumn came with cold winds that swept Manhattan's streets, scattering dry leaves along the sidewalks. It was almost a mirror of what Beth felt inside, a storm of fears and doubts, but also a strange, persistent hope. In the last few days, she barely slept, consumed with worry over what James and his investigator, Daniel Reeves, might uncover. James seemed driven by a force bordering on obsession. He spent hours on the phone, reading reports, talking to lawyers. It was as if each fragment of information about Catherine was a brick in rebuilding not just the past, but their future. One afternoon, Beth sat in her favorite chair in the living room. Emma was on the floor, coloring with markers. Across the table, James stared at his laptop, his face pinched. The steady ping of email notifications filled the apartment. Suddenly his phone buzzed. It was Daniel. James answered immediately. "Talk to me." His face changed instantly, from tension to sheer shock. Beth jumped up, alarmed. "What? Are you sure, Daniel? Send it all, now." When he hung up, he was pale. He ran a hand over his face, exhaling hard. "What is it?" Beth asked, her voice tight. "He did it." Daniel found not only footage of Marcus Delaney entering the hospital's medication room, but also records showing large withdrawals of Pitocin signed with a forged nurse's signature. The nurse was off duty that day. Beth clapped a hand over her mouth. "That means they induced Catherine's risk. The hemorrhage, it was orchestrated." James nodded, his jaw clenched. "More. Daniel found bank statements showing payments from Hartford's office to Marcus's accounts exactly during that period." Beth felt her body give out and sank into a chair, heart pounding. "Oh my God! They murdered their own daughter to gain control over Emma, or at least set up the risk that killed her, then tried to bury it all." James knelt before her, gripping her hands. Now we can prove it, but Beth, it's going to be hell. Hartford will throw everything he has to twist this. She looked at Emma on the rug, head bent, coloring with innocent focus, then back at James. Then let it be hell, as long as Emma's safe in the end. James pulled her into a long, tense hug, full of a desperate sort of resolve. 2 weeks later, the hearing to reassess custody took place. The courtroom was packed. Lawyers, reporters, onlookers. The case had become national news. The Catherine Richardson scandal and her missing daughter were being dug up again, but now with new accusations against the once untouchable Senator Hartford. Beth entered, holding Emma's hand, James on the other side, forming the small, improbable wall of family they had built. The hall smelled of old wood and fear. When the judge entered, the chatter died. Vivian Chen, James's lead lawyer, was the first to speak. Her voice filled the hall with practiced confidence. Your Honor, we present evidence that Catherine Richardson's death was not simply an obstetric accident. We have medical reports detailing absurd dosages of Pitocin administered without clinical justification, images of then head of security Marcus Delaney accessing restricted meds, and bank records showing payments from Senator Hartford to Delaney's accounts. The audience murmured. Hartford, seated with his lawyers, clenched his fists on the table. His face reddened, but he said nothing. Vivian went on. We also have the letter Catherine wrote on her deathbed, clearing James Richardson of any abuse, acknowledging her psychiatric illness and explaining she ran away out of delusional fear. We request immediate full custody be granted to James and Beth Richardson, along with a protective order against Senator Hartford. When the judge turned to Hartford, he rose, puffed up with rage and pride. All of this is a charade orchestrated by this man to cover his failures. He's using my granddaughter as a shield. These allegations are outrageous, baseless. Vivian raised yet another document. Here is an expert's report confirming the signature on the will presented by the Hartford family, which would have given them guardianship, is forged. It was used to deceive the courts and attempt to abduct Emma. Beth shut her eyes tight. The judge slammed his gavel. Given the evidence, I grant provisional full custody to James and Beth Richardson with an immediate restraining order against Senator Hartford. I also order a formal criminal investigation into Marcus Delaney and Senator Hartford himself. Beth's knees buckled. James held her up, and Emma looked from one to the other, not fully grasping it all but smiling because her parents were smiling, even through tears. Across the courtroom, Hartford stood so abruptly he nearly knocked over his chair. The hatred in his eyes was the last thing Beth saw before he stormed out, flanked by security. That night their apartment was quiet except for Emma's soft breathing as she slept in the next room. Beth and James sat at the kitchen table, 2 cups of tea growing cold between them. The weight of the entire day pressed on their shoulders at once. Beth stared at the steam curling from her mug, voice raw. You know what scares me most, she whispered. That for 7 years I was sure I was protecting Emma from a monster, and you were never that monster, just a lost man. James was silent for a long moment. Then he stood, came around the table, and knelt beside her. I'm not perfect, Beth. I made plenty of mistakes. But the one thing I never got wrong was how much I loved Catherine, even when everything was falling apart. And then, how instantly, deeply, I loved Emma the moment I realized she might be mine. Beth closed her eyes, tears slipping free. I stole years from you, years you could have had with her, even though I thought I was doing the right thing. I think we both just did what we could. And look at what we've built, even so. His eyes glistened. When she leaned forward and kissed him, it wasn't out of desperation. It was acceptance, total, aching, hopeful. Months passed. Hartford was convicted on charges of corruption, fraud, and conspiracy. Marcus Delaney, too. Headlines shifted from political scandal to stories of unlikely families and the power of a little girl's kindness. They bought a brownstone in Brooklyn. Not too grand, still a little scuffed by time, but with big windows that poured sunlight into every room. Emma turned the small balcony into a jungle of potted flowers. Every morning, James and Beth walked Emma to school. Then they'd stop by the cafe where it all began, holding hands over steaming cups of coffee. One day after school, Emma, now 10, ran toward them on the sidewalk, her face bright. "Mom, Dad, my teacher said family is who you choose to love, and I told him I have the best family in the whole world." James crouched down and pulled her into a hug so tight she squealed. Beth laid a hand on their backs, her chest almost painfully full. Right there, amid New York's impatient traffic and cold spring wind, they had everything they needed. A little girl who'd once carried only 3 crumpled dollars, a man who found redemption, and a woman who learned that courage was just another name for love. Spring exploded over Brooklyn. Cherry blossoms lined the sidewalks, dropping petals like confetti. Emma, now 23, walked slowly, clutching a small paper bag. She stopped in front of the old Baker's Corner Cafe. The sign was more worn now, but when she pushed open the door, the same warm bell chimed. Coffee, cinnamon, and nostalgia wrapped around her like a soft blanket. She chose a corner table, the same one where she'd once sat between Beth and James countless times. From her bag, she pulled a thick blue journal, its pages crammed with notes, pressed flowers, old receipts. Emma began to write. "If someone had told me when I was 7 that the day I gave my lunch money to a desperate man in a suit would change everything, I would have laughed. Back then, I only knew one thing. My mom taught me to help, even when we didn't have much." She paused, brushing her thumb over a photo taped to the next page. In it, she was maybe 8 or 9, collapsed in James's lap, laughing so hard her head was thrown back. Beth was next to them, wiping tears of laughter. Growing up with 2 such different parents was the greatest gift. My mom, Beth, who carried me through every storm. My dad, James, who showed me love has nothing to do with perfection. And Catherine, my birth mother, who left a letter that lit a path none of us expected. She glanced toward the counter where a young barista was carefully steaming milk, clueless to the history held in those walls. Then kept writing. "I spent years afraid my roots were fragile. Sometimes I'd wake up from dreams that someone was coming to take me away, but now I know family isn't who comes first in the DNA. It's who stays, who fights for you, who holds your hand in the dark." Emma closed the journal and hugged it to her chest, eyes shutting as if she could still hear voices from long ago, drifting in the cozy cafe air. When she returned to their old Brooklyn brownstone, she found Beth on the balcony, tending lavender pots, and James reading a newspaper, glasses slipping down his nose. "Took your time, young lady," Beth teased, lifting the watering can. "Cafe again?" Emma laughed. "Yeah, sometimes I just like remembering how it all began." James lowered the paper, eyes softened by years. His hair was streaked with silver, brows too, but his gentle way was unchanged. He opened his arms, and Emma melted into his embrace, still the safest place in her world. "You know what I love most about you two?" Emma said, glancing from one to the other. "That after everything, you never let my story be about loss. You made sure it was always about starting over." Beth's hand trembled slightly as she brushed a hair from Emma's cheek. "Because that's what it was. What it is." Months later, Emma hosted a small exhibit at the local library. Photos, letters, tiny mementos, an old bracelet of Beth's, James's first cracked phone, yellowed newspaper clippings. At the center was Catherine's original letter, framed. Neighbors came, friends, even strangers. Many cried reading it. An older woman squeezed Emma's hand. "Your story. It reminded me we can always begin again." Emma realized right then that Catherine's legacy wasn't only pain. It was the miracle of how life could bloom, even in the hardest concrete. That night, the 3 of them sat around their dinner table, laughing over some ridiculous story Emma told. Afterward, she reached out and took both their hands. "I just wanted to say thank you for loving each other enough to give me the weirdest, most beautiful family anyone could ever ask for." James's throat bobbed. Beth's eyes were bright with tears. Emma's voice cracked with happiness. I think in the end, that's all we really need, people willing to hold our hand when the rest of the world falls apart. Right there, amid empty plates and half-full glasses, was their truest miracle. The quiet realization that love is what you build every single day, even when you're terrified. It's what you choose to offer with no guarantees. And for Emma, who'd started it all with just $3 crumpled in a cafe, that was the most priceless treasure she could ever hold.